Hi guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. Today I want to do a discussion video, and this is something that I've kind of been pondering over the last month or so. I recently hit my 6-month BookTube anniversary, which is really exciting. However, I also kind of took that time to reflect on how BookTube has changed my reading habits, and I thought that I might share some of my findings with you today. So when I first began my BookTube journey, I posted a video, which I will link down below, and it was just a get to know me video, kind of what my reading tastes were, how I went about choosing which books I was going to read, that sort of thing, just kind of as an introduction to my channel. And since then, some things have changed, and I've grown as a reader, but I've also realized that some of the changes that I've made or that I've noticed are not necessarily good. So yeah, the first change that I have noticed with me is that in my previous video, said that I do not do TBRs. I don't like TBRs. I am strictly a mood reader. And I think that was a little premature for me to say that because in all honesty, I had never really tried making a TBR. I always just mood read, and I never took the time to make an official like monthly TBR or seasonal TBR or anything like that. I think it was premature for me to say that that doesn't work for me because I had never tried it. And now I'm finding that TBRs are huge motivators for me. It helps me streamline what I want to do with my reading for either a month or a season and which books I want to pick and focus on. Because I think, especially as someone who watched YouTube a ton, I was getting this constant inflow of books that I was adding to my TBR, and I didn't have any direction on how to read them to get them knocked off of my TBR. So now I feel like when I do my seasonal TBRs, I have a method to where I'm focusing on, I want to read a couple middle grades. I want to read stuff that's on my shelves, my physical TBR. I want to get series completed. Those sorts of things that I really hone in on. And if I have specific goals, then I know which goals I need to be addressing in that specific month to be able to do what I want to do with my reading and as far as streamlining my TBR. So I will say that since starting BookTube and since kind of having a more purposeful approach to what I'm reading, I'm noticing that TBRs actually do work for me. And I don't necessarily like making really strict TBRs, but I like doing the seasonal TBRs where I have a plethora of books to choose from and I have time to get them done. It's not, this is what I need to read this week and they have to go in a specific order. So it still gives me a little bit of leeway as far as what my mood is, but I'm still able to get my goals accomplished for the most part. Another thing that I've noticed with my reading is I have become a lot more critical as far as what I am willing to give 5 stars to. I was always kind of hard to please in that area to begin with, but now I am realizing that with the amount of books that I've been reading, my brain is being oversaturated with stories. And if yours is not an absolute stellar story, if I'm seeing plot holes and things that don't make sense, then I'm not really willing to overlook that as easily as I might have been before. And this isn't just in books. I'm noticing this also in movies and in television shows and in other entertainment that I'm consuming, that I am much more critical. A prime example of this is that this past weekend, my husband and I watched Avengers Endgame, and I had never seen it before. We have been watching all of the Marvel Universe movies from the very beginning to the very end because I had only watched about half of them, and so we decided together that we were going to watch them from beginning to end because I wanted to see Endgame, but I wanted to understand what was going on also. And we got done with the movie and I turned right to him and I'm like, well, what about this? And this didn't make sense and this made no sense. Why would they make that choice? I don't buy it, and I just tore the movie apart, and I honestly didn't really enjoy it that much, which I know is probably like heresy as far as a lot of you are concerned, but I didn't. And it's hard for me because I look at these books, and another example, I just read Thunderhead and Scythe. I really enjoyed them, but I only gave them 4 stars, especially Thunderhead, because there is a specific plot point in that book, which is hugely spoilery, so I'm not going to say what it is, but there's a specific plot point in that book that I'm like, really? Like, that, ugh. It's too gimmicky, it's too convenient, and I'm just not buying it. There's another way to get the end result without having to be so gimmicky. And so it will be a 4 star book for me, even though the ending I loved. I love the premise of the book. I love the characters in the book. Everything else was like kind of set up for it to be 5 stars. But then those couple of things will prevent me from giving it that full 5 stars. So I'm finding myself to be very critical. I give a lot of 3 stars and a lot of 4 stars. And if I really don't like a book, it'll be a 2 star. And I have another discussion video coming out soon talking about 1 stars and DNFs. So anyway, but 5 stars are really, really hard for me to come by. And that's something that I've noticed has been a result of me reading so much, which is the third thing that I have noticed with me being on BookTube and doing all the readathons and making the TBRs and just having that being my driving force is I am reading an exponential amount more than I was prior. And I was reading a lot, I felt like, prior to actually making a BookTube channel. This year, I currently am at like 146 books for the year, which is ridiculous. That being said, I read a lot of graphic novels and I read a lot of middle grade. So, take it with a grain of salt, but still, that's an insane amount of reading to be done throughout the year. And we're not done yet. I still have 2 full months to read even more. And it's just bonkers to me that I'm able to get through that many books. But that also explains why, my brain is oversaturated with plots and storylines, and I'm able to kind of nitpick what I don't like about books is because of all of the stories that I'm getting through and at the pace that I'm getting through them. I have found that, especially this past month, I really reflected because this past month in October, I read 20 books in the month, which was ridiculous. And the last time I read that many books was probably in March when I did middle grade March, and I was trying to do a book a day with Krista, and I made it to like 28 books in the month. And they were all middle grade, which was easier, but it's still a lot. And when I'm reading that much, I'm not enjoying what I'm reading as much because I'm going through it at such a fast pace. I'm not necessarily speeding up my audiobooks to insane speeds. At the most, I'll put it at 1.8 speed. And that's if it's like a middle grade and the narrator is ridiculously slow. But on the normal, the most I'll speed up an audiobook is to like 1.4, 1.6, depending on the narrator. I don't listen to audiobooks quickly. I'm not a fast reader. I'm just consuming a lot of books. And so the amount in which I'm reading, I'm going through them at such a fast pace that I'm not enjoying them at the level where I could be. And so that's something that I really took away from my experience this October is that I need to slow down. Whether that means slowing down the pace of my audiobooks or just taking the time to only read a few chapters a day and really ponder on them and think on them and appreciate the books for what they are, I need to slow it down. And so that's something that I'm working on this month. Another thing that I noticed is that I have been buying a lot more books. Now, I won't say all, 97% of the books that I buy are through the thrift store. And so I'm not spending necessarily an exorbitant amount of money on books, but I am bringing a lot of books into my home. Like I have this very small bookcase. This is just a 3-shelf bookcase right here that I keep in my bedroom to film in front of. But I have right next to me over here mounds of books that I have nowhere to put them. I have 2 6-foot tall bookshelves downstairs and they are full of books. and I have nowhere to put these books. And so I'm realizing that that's a problem, and I either need to be more strict about reading off of my shelves and getting some of these books read so I can determine if I want to unhaul them, or I just need to be better about putting a halt on my constant trips to the thrift store and library book sales. There's actually a library book sale tomorrow that is on my calendar, and I want to go to it so bad, but I scheduled a meeting for myself right in the middle of it so that I couldn't go to it. Like, I gave myself a specific reason why I couldn't go to it, because being a stay-at-home mom, my schedule is very, very flexible, and if I didn't have a specific reason why I couldn't go, I would have made an excuse to go and buy more books and add more to an already overwhelming problem. And so, it's proving to be an issue with my self-control, because not only do I like to film the book hauls and going thrifting with me and that sort of thing, but I love buying books. If I could afford to go to an independent bookstore and buy all of my books from there, I would in a heartbeat. I cannot afford that. And so, I don't know. I'm having an issue and I need an intervention because I need to stop buying so many books. Another thing that I've noticed is that I have been reading a lot more things that I wouldn't normally pick up, that either I'm reading for a specific reason because I want to do a video about it, or because I'm just branching out and watching different YouTubers and they're making things sound better to me than I previously maybe would have thought. And so, some examples of that are like Sing Unburied Sing, which is literary fiction, which I don't really read a whole lot of. This past month, I read a couple of thrillers or suspense, or I don't know what they're. Apparently, I described one of them wrong because I didn't think it was scary and it wasn't supposed to be scary. And I apologized for that. But I read some things that my understanding was it was supposed to at least make me scared or apprehensive or get my heart beating a little bit. It didn't, but I at least tried. And so I've been trying to kind of branch out and do a couple of things here and there, not like overkill, because let's not get crazy here. I still want to read what I want to read, but I have been branching out into a few different little areas here and there and doing things that I might not otherwise do. But then on the other side of that, I'm also sometimes feeling pressured, not necessarily by anybody else, but by myself, to read things that I'm not really interested in. So a prime example of this is that I put on my TBR for November Little Women. I have been wanting to read this classic for a long time. The movie's coming out next month. I had a video idea where I wanted to read Little Women and then read, there are 5 retellings that I could find just like that. 3 of them were middle grade, 2 of them were adult, and I was like, that'd be such a great video to read Little Women and then read some of the retellings and compare them and just do a video about it. I got 3 chapters into Little Women and I could feel myself starting to go into a slump. It was so boring to me, and I couldn't do it. So I had to set it down. And that's, an example of something that I really felt torn putting it down, because I had committed to, I want to read this, and I had a reason why I wanted to read it, and putting it down really was hard for me because I felt like I should read it and I should love it because so many other people love it. And maybe classics just aren't my thing, and I don't need to feel guilty about that. That there's so many of them that so many of my friends love and just rant and rave about, and I feel like I'm missing out. And every time I try to read one, though, I'm just not enjoying it. And so that's something that I've really kind of had to reflect back on, is if I'm not enjoying a book, I should feel no pressure to finish it. I'm not in a class that mandates that I read it. I'm not being graded on anything. So if I'm not loving it, it can be set aside, and nothing's gonna happen to me because of that. And I need to embrace that and be okay with that. So yeah, that is something else that I have been kind of a side effect that I've been feeling since I've started BookTube. So those are the main topics that I wanted to talk about in this video specifically. If you are a booktuber, I would love to hear kind of what some of your reflections are on how your reading life has changed as a result of BookTube. Are you noticing some of these side effects that I have mentioned? I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. And if you are not currently on BookTube, I would like to know how maybe how watching BookTube has changed your reading. Because I know that was something else that really affected my reading early on when I was just watching BookTube. All of a sudden, I started reading a ton more, and I was reading very different things than what I normally would have picked up. And so I feel like there's a discussion to be had there as well. So that's going to do it for me for this. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that it kind of got your gears churning a little bit as far as how we are affecting our social media presence or our social media consumption to affect our daily lives, and something that is a hobby for us, how that is impacting us on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time, see ya!